I was very young when this happened. I don't remember much. I suppressed most of the memories from those months. Now, I won't bore you. I want to get this out. I know what will happen when I post this. They know who I am. They just never thought that I would speak. They were wrong. I'm just going to cut to the chase. April 23rd, 2008. I had just turned 13 when my parents had died. The cop knocking on the door, my grandmother hearing the news and sobbing her eyes out. The crash, the fire. I lost it. I stood in my room, moping for hours. I couldn't handle the stress. I was a blank face for weeks. Nothing seemed to be enjoyable anymore. My grandmother got very worried. She took me to see a grief counselor a week later, and I was diagnosed with depression. I went about my day as well as I could, going to school, eating out with friends. It could have been pleasant if I wasn't forced to by the counselor. How I hated her. As usual, I was walking home from counseling like every other Wednesday. I was tired and I just wanted to get home and sleep. I was not one for talking about emotions and I hated every session. I turned down onto Harper Street when the black minivan rolled up next to me. It was a slow night in November and nobody was out on this quiet road. The minivan abruptly stopped next to me. Men in comfy clothes hopped out. "Hey kid, stop," one in a hoodie said. He had the hood down, covering his face in dark shadow. I faced them. "What do you want?" "You're coming with us," he said flatly. "No, screw off." I started walking again at a quicker pace. I heard the van start rolling after me. And then I was slammed to the ground. I knew what their intentions were. At first I did, but I would not expect what was to come. I felt the sack go over my head, and I squirmed as they lifted me and tossed me into the van. I tried screaming out, but one of them socked me in the face. I went out. I woke up to find myself still in the car, my hands tied. Everything was jet black under the sack. How long had I been out? I could hear the men in the car talking. My head rang and I couldn't make out everything though. The car made a sharp right and I rode against the door and I groaned in pain. The men didn't react. I don't know how long I was in that car. It could have been hours or just a minute. Time was irrelevant at that moment. After however long had passed, the car stopped. I heard the door slide open and click. I was picked up by my arms and dragged out. I could hear lots of chatter and voices. I heard screaming and crying. And then I was tossed into a small room. The sack was ripped off. But before I could get a look at the face of my captors, the door slammed shut. I was in a small room with padded walls and a small cot with no sheets. What the hell? I looked through the tiny window of the door first thing. What I saw shocked me. Other doors stretched down the hall as far as the eye could see. At least that's what I could see from my window. Other eyes stared hatefully from the other windows. I looked at them in a trance. What had these people been through? Why us? I saw two men in black with helmets walking down the halls, guns at their sides. I ducked back down as I saw the others do the same. I cowered in the corner as one of the guards looked through the tiny window. He sneered and he walked on. I heard a commotion down the hall. An irritated voice rang out. I heard fast-paced footsteps running back towards me. The guard came back, fumbling with his keys. He opened the door and he rolled his eyes. He had pale skin and a slight stubble. He grimaced down at me and he hoisted me up. He grabbed a sack from a hook on his belt. "No, no, no!" I cried out as he put it over my head. I struggled and I managed to land a kick to his ribs. He let out a loud grunt and shoved me against the wall. Another guard rushed in. The second guard pinned me to the wall as the first guard put the sack over my head. "What do you want from me? Please!" I screamed. They tossed me on some sort of cart. They didn't talk through the entire process. The cart made multiple twists and turns, and then I was hoisted up again and I was carried into a separate room. They sat me down in a chair. I felt the cold steel wrap around my wrist. I winced under the sack. The guards left the room and they slammed the door shut. Minutes later, the sack was ripped off my head. I gasped in the fresh air. I looked up to see a middle-aged woman in a chair opposite of me. She wore a pantsuit and glasses. She looked at me calmly. Another guard stood on her left, staring me down grimly. "Did I do something wrong?" I murmured. She didn't say anything. "Did I do anything wrong?" I was cut off. "Hello there, Peter. I assume you're very thirsty right now. Would you like a drink?" She offered calmly. I shook my head. "All right then." "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. I shook my head again. "Well, I can't be super specific, but I'll try to explain. So our government is trying to cure multiple rare diseases. You know that, right?" I nodded. "Well, what we do here is to try to cure those diseases. We've cured Ebola and even some minor forms of cancer. However, only some of these vaccines work. This research facility is where we test out these vaccines," she explained. "By kidnapping children." The words came out before I could think. Her calm demeanor faltered. She looked at me with steely eyes. "I suppose." I didn't look at her. I stared down at my dirty clothes. The guard spoke up. "Look up." The woman started speaking again. "We're going to be testing a vaccine on you tomorrow morning after some prep. You will go through a 3-step process. Part 1 is decontamination. You will be cleaned thoroughly and will be wiped of any bodily issues. Part 2 is preparation. You will be put into a special tubing and will be put in a chamber to avoid spreading of disease through bodily fluids. You will have an airtight mask as well. Part 3 is injection. You will be briefed once you complete Part 2. I didn't speak. This was absurd. "Do you understand?" she asked. I nodded. "Good. Lance Corporal, you may take him back," she said to the guard. The guard grabbed me without saying a word and put yet another sack over my head. I grimaced as I heard the door open. I thought about my grandmother and my friends at school. What were they thinking? I had been gone for hours, but who knows how long. I thought about all of this until I was tossed into the cell. The cold concrete floor scraping my arm as I landed. I let out a soft cry and the sack was pulled off my head. The door slammed shut and I just sat there. I must have sat there for hours, thinking about what was happening to me, and where I was, and how I should have run faster. I didn't sleep very much. I woke up to the sound of a door opening. It was loud and metallic and it came open with a crash. 2 guards came in. The 2 from the first time. The first guard put the sack over my head. I struggled as usual. However, the second guard took pity on me. "Take it off, and we'll take the safe route." The first guard replied, "No, we were told to keep him blind. What do you want me to do? Hold his eyes shut for him?" The sack was suddenly ripped off my head, and the air greeted me. I looked up at the guards. The first one was pissed, and the second was equally pissed at the first guard. "Alright, kid. You're gonna see some nasty stuff. It's not like you'll live to tell," the first guard said. The second guard nudged him, and the first guard stopped talking. Even in the horror of the situation, I could feel the awkwardness. They hauled me up by my arms and sat me on the awaiting cart. It was like a golf cart, but with a large bed at the back and no roof. They drove down the hall for what must have been half a mile. The little rooms lined the hall. Inside of every room were hateful little eyes. I couldn't make out any faces. It was too dark inside those lightless rooms. The cart turned down the hall opposite to the room where the lady explained the situation, if you could call it that. The cart abruptly stopped. "Alright, you will need to wear the sack for this part," the second guard said. And then the sack came over my eyes. We walked and walked and walked, and then the sack was ripped off. I was alone in a tiled room. I looked around. A single dingy light bulb sat in the center of the ceiling, flickering lazily. A loud voice filled the room from hidden speakers. "Hello, Peter. Welcome to part 1. You will be completely clean so we can move on to step 2. It was the lady. "Please undress so you can continue." I looked around and I crossed my arms. "Peter, if you don't, there will be consequences," she said. I took off my clothes. Who knows what they would have done if I didn't. "Good. Now you will take a very special shower with distilled water. The water will make it easy to inject said vaccine," she explained. One of the tiles moved away, and a shower head popped out. The water turned on instantly. As I was a sweaty and dirty mess, I accepted the shower and I scrubbed. Not having any soap wasn't an issue. I was just happy to be clean. After about 10 minutes, the nozzle went back. I heard a loud clang and saw somebody toss a gown into the room, like the kind patients have to wear at the hospital. "Good job. Now please put the gown on. Your first clothes are to be disposed of, as you will no longer need them." What does she mean, I won't need them? The guard said that I wouldn't make it out. That's pretty clear. I don't know. I shrugged on the gown and the door opened. The 2 guards grabbed me and walked me across the hall. They opened the door across from the shower room. Inside was a trashy waiting room. 2 other boys my age sat in plastic chairs, wearing the same gown as me. The guard shut the door as they tossed me in. I looked at the 2 boys. "Hello," one of them murmured. "Hi," I replied. I guess I wouldn't be alone during whatever happened next. Or I could at least hope so. "I'm Ryan and that's Sean," he said. "I'm Peter," I replied, saying my own name. "How long have you been in here?" 3 days, he said. "Sean, well, he's been in here for months. Always refused. I don't know what they did to him, but he's pretty static. Yeah, static is the word." Sean's mouth had moved slightly. He sat unblinking, staring straight ahead. "So, how did they get you?" he asked. "What do you mean?" I looked at him. How did they, get you? You mean kidnap me? Yeah. He rolled his eyes. They put a sack over my head and tossed me in a car. How about you? Same, he replied. He looked down at his shoes. I took a seat at the chair across from him. A motel painting hung on the wall above my head. Sad. We all just kind of sat around for a while. Nothing really interesting happened. Unless you count Sean moving his head for the first time in 15 minutes interesting. Then it was pretty boring. I didn't complain though. It was nice to be in others' company, even if it was against my own will. I was starting to doze off when the door opened. We were all pulled up and put into a single file line. We walked down the hallways and were put into a room where 3 cylindrical pods sat. I knew what these were. Hopefully, it wouldn't be my coffin. Hello. Now we are on to phase 2. Please insert yourself in the pods. The staff will then help you buckle up and get your masks on. It was her again. Her voice was eerily cheerful. Ryan and I got into our pods, not wanting to know what would happen if we didn't. Sean just stood there, but not for long. A woman in a polo shirt and khakis rushed in and got him into his pod. She then fastened tight straps across his waist, chest, and knees, and then did the same for me and Ryan. I looked over at Ryan and he nodded to me. I nodded back and I took a deep breath. She then fastened the tight mask over my face, pulling the straps on them tight. Air started to rush into the mask with force, and she did the same to Ryan and Sean. And then a glass roof came down over the pods. The woman ran out of the room. My heart quickened. Wait, what vaccine was this for? What if they injected us with Ebola or something even deadlier that we didn't know about? The lights in the room dimmed and 3 people in biosuits rushed in. A little hole opened up in the pod and a needle poked through. I cringed. Stay very still, a voice said. I need to be very precise. I felt the needle break the skin and the plunger get pushed. I winced. He pulled the needle out and he slapped a bandage on it. The hole closed. I looked at Ryan. Alright, good job. You each got different vaccines for METS B6709. That is a disease that causes extreme vomiting and skin reactions. And so if you start to feel itchy, please let us know. And do not worry about the vomit, as your mask has a vacuum feature and it will clear up anything, she said. You will receive the vaccine momentarily. Just a disclaimer. All these vaccines are still being tested. Some may have some side effects. Wait, what? I waited for a few moments when my skin started to itch. It worked fast. I kicked my foot against the glass and the man in the biosuit came in. I felt my stomach quiver and I vomited. The man quickly came over and flipped a switch on the pod. The vomit was sucked down a tube, and airflow soon resumed. Another biosuit person ran in with a case. She opened the case and pulled out a needle. The hole opened. This will hurt a bit, she said. Just stay calm and take some deep breaths. I screamed as the needle punctured the flesh. I cried and yelled for help and for it to stop. She pulled out the needle after a minute and slapped yet another band-aid onto the wound. The hole closed and she moved on to Ryan and Sean. After a few minutes, the itching and vomiting had stopped. I lay back against the pod. But then I hear the screaming. I look over to see Sean getting injected with the vaccine. He struggled against his constraints and he screeched. The biosuit woman couldn't get the needle in. And then Sean's skin started to stretch into grotesque, inhuman ways. He seemed to be growing very rapidly. The scream deepened and the glass broke. The constraints ripped and Sean leaped out of the pod and onto the woman. Now the woman screamed and a wet gurgling sound could be heard. 2 armed guards rushed as the other biosuit guy rushed out. What was once Sean was now this thing. He was hunched over and his skin was bubbly and pale, almost looking like putty. He turned to the guards and he screamed like a banshee. The guards opened fire with their rifles and Sean nearly exploded from the bullets. The wounds ripped right through his flesh and went all over the walls. Blood splattered onto his and Ryan's pods. More guards rushed in and started shooting. Sean lay in a heap on the ground, just a pile of mush and gore. The guard opened Ryan's pod and then mine, and they ushered us out. We are carried down the hall roughly and tossed into a chamber. The door slammed shut. Ryan and I are freaked the hell out. "What the hell was that?" he nearly yelled. I couldn't even speak. It was horrific. He... Ryan stopped speaking. "What if that happens to us?" I stopped breathing for a second and I looked over at him. "Holy shit," I murmured. Moments later, biosuit people run in along with 3 guards. They looked at our terrified faces and one says, "You did not get the same vaccine as Sean. You are fine. However, you will be tested and studied for the following weeks to see how the vaccines affect the human biome and cell reproduction." She was cut off by the sound of gunfire. The guards turn around and run down the hall, shoving the biohazard people aside. I don't know what I was thinking at that moment, but I looked at Ryan and he nodded. We got up and we ran like hell. An alarm started ringing through the building. Guards ran past us, not even looking at us. What possibly could be going on? We turned down the hall and ran into the explanation lady and 4 guards. Ryan and I fell to the ground. She looked down at us with a grin. "Nice try, kiddos, but you don't get to leave. In fact, you are to be disposed of." My face went pale as the guards picked us up and ran us down the hall the other way. Ryan and I tried to fight back. We were brought through these 2 double doors and then into this giant circular room. In the middle sat a large round pit with bubbling fluids pouring from a tube. It kind of looked like one of those things that dispense water continuously into a pool. The woman nodded at the pool of what I assume was chemicals to the guards. The guards started carrying us. Ryan and I looked at each other and we shook our heads. I don't know how this happened, but it was a miracle. The doors burst open and 2 men in combat uniforms shot the 4 guards down, barely missing me and Ryan. The guards fell into this pool of chemicals. Ryan and I did not see the aftermath. Unfortunately for us, Explanation Woman pulled out a pistol and shot the 2 guards. They went down. She sighed. "Such a pity," she said. She turned to us and said to me, "You first." She grabbed me by the collar and shoved me towards the tube dispenser chemicals. She pointed the gun at Ryan and said, "You come near us and you die." I struggled as she pulled my head closer. I cringed. She looked at me and laughed. And then Ryan tackled her. Her head plunged into the fluid and she screamed. My eyes widened. Ryan quickly pulled back. I looked at the tube and I saw a red lever. I got up and I pulled it. The fluid stopped gushing. Only a few drops spewed out. What was once the woman was now a burnt, rashed corpse. Her whole head was hanging on by the last few tendons. The burnt and boiling skin peeled. I leaned over and I vomited. Ryan looked at the corpse wide-eyed. Holy shit. I sat down and I leaned against the wall. I shut my eyes. And then the doors banged open again. More people in combat uniforms rushed in. "Heads up. Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're being detained," said one of them. We were being rescued? Never had those words felt so good. I was returned home under a made-up story that I'd been kidnapped by a local predator, completely made up. Lucky for me, I was safe and sound. Unfortunately, Ryan was sent to a mental hospital after he plunged the woman's head into the chemicals. I still try to visit him every now and then, but I can't talk to him. All he does is rant about what he calls the conquered woman. Who knows what that means? It turns out a private military contractor was hired by the three-letter agency to make bioweapons for torture, and we were there to test an anti-serum. The base was an underground facility in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, just hours from where I live. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get over what I had seen, but I'll try my best just to forget.